It was supposed to be another high-risk bombing run, but what happened that day defied every rule of flight and survival. In the summer of 1944, a B-17 flying fortress torn open mid-air refused to fall. Its cockpit gone, its pilot exposed to the freezing heavens. And yet it kept flying. Not by controls, not by instruments, but by the raw will of its crew. This isn't a story of machinery, it's a story of muscle, blood, and brotherhood. A tale that even seasoned pilots struggle to believe. This is the true account of how one B-17 flew with no cockpit and the crew that turned death into legend. The mission to Budapest, a fortress sent into fire. July 14th, 1944. The target, Budapest. A critical artery in Hitler's war machine, rail yards pulsing with supplies, troops, and fuel. 60 B-17s roared eastward in formation, slicing through the sky at 25,000 feet. Among them was MSP, a battle-weary fortress piloted by 24-year-old First Lieutenant Swanson. Its skin was patched, its crew seasoned, and its name etched in grease pencil and superstition. Their orders were clear: cripple Budapest's lifeline. As the Hungarian border approached, radios crackled with tension. Flak towers were already waking. This was no ordinary raid. This was a declaration, a warning shot at the spine of the Reich. And MSP? She would soon be the loudest one fired. The Flak Storm, Budapest's relentless defenses. Hungary wasn't welcoming. The moment the formation crossed the threshold, the sky erupted. Walls of black flak punched upward like volcanic fists, bursting inches from the wings. MSP was caught in the chaos, her tail shredded, holes ripped into her fuselage like paper against a storm. Each explosion felt like a hammer to the bones. Still, Swanson pushed forward, his eyes locked on the target, his hands frozen on the yoke. The crew shouted over the din, coordinates, damage, prayers. The Ferencváros rail yards came into view, but so did the steel rain. This was where fortresses were tested, not in hangars, but here, in the crucible of fire and fury. And MSP was barely holding together. A pilot without a cockpit, Swanson takes control. Then, the unthinkable. An 88mm shell found its mark, hitting MSP square on the nose. In a single, blinding flash, the entire front section vanished. Vapor, blood, screams silenced in an instant. The bombardier and navigator were gone, just gone. The exposed cabin flooded with freezing air, spraying glass and steel like shrapnel rain. Sergeant Wesley Tucker, manning the starboard gun, took metal to the chest and slumped forward. The aircraft buckled, pitched violently upward, its balance shattered. The cockpit? Gone. The control panel? Obliterated. Yet somehow, through instinct or miracle, Swanson clung to life, face battered, hands groping at cables where the yoke used to be. MSP should have died there, but this B-17 had other plans. A pilot without a cockpit, Swanson takes control. Swanson should have passed out. No instruments, no shield from the wind, no control column, just open sky and chaos. Yet he stayed conscious, eyes narrowed against the -30-degree wind, fingers bleeding as they fumbled through the shredded fuselage. Where the cockpit once was, only tangled control cables remained. He grabbed them, raw, frayed metal sinews of a dying beast, and pulled. MSP trembled, groaned, and obeyed. Slowly, impossibly, she leveled out. Nearby, the crew of another fortress stared in disbelief. A B-17 with no nose had just rejoined formation like a ghost out of legend. Swanson wasn't flying her anymore, he was keeping her soul alive with sheer force of will. The fortress, maimed but moving, refused to fall just yet. Blood, ice, and steel, holding together a shattered fortress. Inside MSP, reality was a battlefield of its own. Oxygen masks froze, blood pooled in corners, frost spread across the inside of windows like veins. The waist gunners, still at their posts, watched the floor buckle beneath their boots. In the chaos, they discovered what had to be done: fly the aircraft manually. One by one, the surviving crew took turns yanking exposed control cables by hand, their movements guided only by instinct, and shouted directions from Swanson. No instruments, no gauges, just muscle, memory, and grit. Every second airborne was a gamble against physics. But still, MSP clawed through the air, a fortress in name alone, held aloft by 9 men, broken yet unbending. Man versus machine, flying by hand through hell. They weren't flying anymore, they were surviving. Each movement was a negotiation with death. MSP had become a skeletal rattletrap, a dragon missing its head, flapping through the air in a desperate bid for life. The bomb bay doors jammed open, creating deadly drag. Frostbite crept over fingers like invisible fire. Engine gauges were useless, instruments gone. The crew relied on instinct, reacting to vibrations and the eerie hum of half-functioning engines. Swanson barked commands, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. They pulled cables, balanced her weight, and kept the battered bird moving, inch by agonizing inch. There was no map for this, no manual. They were flying the impossible, and the impossible was flying back. Final blow, engine failure and the fall behind. Then came the second strike. Another flak burst shattered the No. 2 engine in a cloud of smoke and twisted steel. MSP shuddered violently, losing airspeed, altitude, and hope. The formation disappeared into the distance, helpless to turn back. Now alone, MSP struggled against gravity, her broken wings wobbling with every gust. With one engine gone and drag worsening by the second, she began to sag, like a wounded animal falling behind the herd. Swanson knew what this meant. The fortress was dying, but they weren't done fighting. With grit in his jaw and frost in his veins, he gave the order, prepare to bail. It was time to let go, but only when every last second had been earned. The last decision. Swanson orders the crew to bail. 10 minutes. That's how long MSP flew alone, wounded, wheezing through thinning air with her guts exposed to the sky. Swanson held her steady. No cockpit, no windshield, just raw wind and bloodied resolve. The crew, frostbitten and half-shocked, scrambled to the open bomb bay. One by one, they leapt into the abyss, trusting gravity over steel. Swanson refused to go, not yet. He'd hold her until the last man was out. Then, alone, he waited for the fortress to stall. She pitched violently. Swanson grabbed his chute, leapt, only to feel it snag on jagged metal. The fabric tore. He tumbled unconscious, through frozen air, a broken fortress falling from the sky, and her pilot tumbling right behind her. Falling to earth, a forest, a fracture, a miracle. Swanson woke mid-fall, blurred vision, shredded chute. The earth was rising fast. With seconds to spare, he yanked the last line. The chute opened, barely. It wasn't enough. The ground would break him. Then, through the blur, trees. Swanson angled himself, aiming for the thick canopy near what looked like a POW camp. He hit the branches like a wrecking ball, snapping limbs, ripping skin. His leg shattered, pain exploded. But he was alive, barely. German medics rushed from the camp. They found him bloodied, barely breathing, and in a twist stranger than fiction, his entire crew had landed nearby. They were already captured and reunited. Against all odds, every last man of MSP had survived. Together again, behind enemy lines. Brotherhood behind barbed wire, 9 months of waiting. For 9 long months, the crew of MSP endured life in a German POW camp. Cold, hunger, and boredom clawed at their minds, but their bond held fast. Swanson, leg in a brace, became a symbol of resilience in the camp, the man who flew without a cockpit. They spoke often of that day, of blood in the skies, and how muscle memory, instinct, and brotherhood had kept them alive. On April 30th, 1945, US forces rolled through, liberating the camp. The war was over, for them at least. 8 young men and 1 broken fortress had refused to die. They walked out together, saluting the sky. MSP had fallen, but her spirit lived in every one of them. Ewald Swanson returned home a hero. Promoted to lieutenant colonel, he chose a quiet life with his wife Catherine and their son in Michigan. But some stories never fade. The legend of the cockpitless B-17 spread among pilots like gospel. Swanson remained the only known man to ever fly a fortress with no cockpit. In the years that followed, the crew of MSP would meet often, old warriors with cracked voices and stronger memories. They didn't speak of glory. They spoke of survival, of cable-burned hands and frost-bitten resolve. Swanson passed away in 2009 at 89. But the story, it lives on. Because some planes don't just fly, they fight. And some men don't just survive. They define what survival means.